Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It is Steve with Real Progressives. I wanted to talk real quickly about the term and what taxation really is in our world. What it is that we need taxes for, and what Real Progressives' position on taxes is. One of our frequent viewers came to us and sent us a message saying, hey, I see a lot of anti-tax commentary coming out of Real Progressives, and I just want to understand what it is that you guys are actually talking about. And so I said, all right, I can do that. Let me go ahead and do a live stream, because I'm sure if you have that question, that other people probably have it too. So when you have a state currency, okay, when a state, in other words, the United States or Russia or Japan or Canada, Australia, the UK, when you have a state-owned currency, in other words, it is driven by the overall state, okay, that state currency maintains its value through taxation. In other words, if you don't tax that dollar, it becomes as worthless as the piece of paper it's printed on. So people haven't realized this because they don't go far enough back in time to understand state-driven fiat currencies. In other words, the basis of chartalism, okay? So a government tried to figure out how it could get people not to be slaves per se, but actually serve the government's needs, building roads, building castles, building bombs, building whatever it is that the government wanted to create, aqueducts, you name it. And so what it did was it said, hey, we'll give you this piece of paper or this coin if you'll do this work. And the people looked around, they were like, I don't need that coin. Why do I need your coin? Your coin doesn't do anything for me. I'm going to go fishing. I'm going to go ahead and plow my field. I'm going to do whatever it is that I want to do to take care of my family. And the state said, well, shoot, you got a point there. So maybe if we levy a tax on it, then you'll need that coin, and then you'll do what we say to get that coin. So back in the day, they levied a tax payable only in the coin or the paper or whatever it is that the state decided. So, flash forward all these years, and throughout history, you've got people that have misappropriated what it means to tax because they didn't understand the difference between a currency issuer, or whoever the sovereign is, and a currency user, whoever uses that currency, okay? So the imposition of a tax payable only in the state's currency is what drives the use of and the need for that currency. It's not to pay for things, okay? It does not pay for things at the federal level or at the currency issuer level. It just doesn't. That's not the way it works. The currency issuer never can run out of its own currency. It creates it. And the way that it holds its value, because the government is the price setter. It is the monopoly issuer of its own currency. It's the only one, so therefore it sets the value through taxation and through setting the price for things it's willing to pay for. So in other words, if it's willing to pay a certain amount for customer service, or it's willing to pay a certain amount for project management, or it's willing to pay a certain amount for a hammer or for a nail, or it's willing to pay a certain amount for a toilet seat, okay? It is the price setter, because now the public sector will meet or beat that price throughout. That's the way it works, okay? So the imposition of a tax is not to actually pay for things unless you're not the currency issuer. If you're a state, when the state levies a tax, the state is in the state of Maine, the state of Maryland, the state of Pennsylvania, the state of California, whatever. When they issue a tax, that tax funds their government operations. It is what actually pays for things, okay? But the currency issuer doesn't require an income, okay? So when the federal government says that it's broke, when the federal government says it's broke, you know it is lying to you. When the federal government tries to tell you that it's borrowing US dollars from China, it is lying to you. These are simple things to understand when you don't go in there with your emotions and you just go in there with your brain and you think it through. Where did the dollar come from? Does the dollar come from rich people or does it come from the federal government? It comes from the federal government. Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution says that Congress alone holds the power of spending. Congress alone. So then you ask yourself, well, what is the Federal Reserve? What is the Federal Reserve? Let's talk about that for a minute. The Federal Reserve was created by Congress to standardize our currency and create a payment clearing system. Okay? Back then, you had Bank A that had Chase bucks, and you had Bank B that had First National Bank of whatever bucks, and you had Philly bucks, and you had Joey bucks, and you had Susie bucks. And it was almost like a foreign exchange. Sometimes Susie bucks weren't as much as Chase bucks. And so when you go to make a payment, there was no predictability. You had no understanding. You walked in, there was a lot of corruption, a lot of corruption. So in order to standardize and make a clearing payment for the United States, Congress came up with the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Now, unfortunately, people have taken bits of truth, twisted it into some fairy tale, and you have the tale of the creature of Jekyll Isle. You have all the Dennis Kucinich, Ron Paul, conspiracy nonsense that Alex Jones peddles. And unfortunately, even within our progressive community, you have the same nonsense being spewed. So anyway, the point of a tax, though, is to drive the currency. It drives the need for the currency. That way you're not using bitcoins. You can't use bitcoins to pay your taxes. Think this through, guys, gals. It's really not that hard to understand once you get past your conspiracy blogs and your Global Research CA and your Market Watch and your Zero Hedge and all the other nonsense out there, okay? Once you get past the lies, you can see things very clearly. Anyway, so taxes are a monetary instrument, a tool that allows us to slow an economy down or speed an economy up. They are not to pay for things, okay? So when we at Real Progressives tell you that there's no reason to raise taxes on regular people, or anyone really, quite frankly, to pay for things, we're not lying to you. We're telling you that that is an extra battle. We're telling you that that is an extra battle that does not need to be fought if your goal is to save lives with Medicare for all. If your goal is to save lives with getting green energy. If your goal is to save children from the noose of student loan debt, we want to save them from that, we can do that. So when we tell you that taxes don't pay for that stuff, we're trying to tell you that we are not stupid. We recognize you got to negotiate with the Republicans. We recognize that you've got to negotiate with an awful lot of people. The state doesn't lack for its own currency. It can clear those accounts. It can pay those accounts off. It can do whatever we need it to do. But sadly, our need, our desire, our perverse need to see taxes paying for things, because that's how our finances at home work. Well, remember that term currency issuer and currency user. Just like the state of Maine, just like the state of Pennsylvania, just like California, and just like Bill Gates, ironically, we are all currency users. We can't create our own money. And banks, for example, can't even create money in the sense that they're creating new financial assets. What they're doing is they're creating debt denominated in the United States dollar. They're creating IOUs. So they're taking a liability They're assuming a liability, and then when you pay your bank loan off, it zeroes out in the back end, the bank keeps the interest, and you move on. That's how they make their money, through interest payments. Okay? Taxes don't pay for this stuff. They don't pay for roads at the federal level. They don't pay for the school system at the federal level. They don't pay for anything. They don't pay for bombs. They don't pay for Israel. They don't pay for our nuclear power plants. They don't pay for anything. Taxpayers at the federal level literally pay for nothing. Nothing. It is a tool to speed up and slow down the economy, and nothing more. Now, are taxes necessary? Taxes are absolutely necessary, otherwise the dollar would be worthless. Taxes are what give the value, not the gas, petrodollar, although real resources constrain spending, and gas is certainly a real resource. Okay, do you see the difference? Does that make sense? It's really pretty simple once you understand it. When people say, well, if you print money, which we don't do anyway, okay, that's gold standard nonsense, but when you keystroke money into existence, won't that create inflation? Well, no, it won't. Let's talk about why it won't create inflation. Inflation is not about money being in the economy. Inflation is about not having enough goods and services in the economy. Now, let me ask you a question. How many people do you know of have withheld going to the doctor because they can't afford to go to the doctor? Do you think they're not going to the doctor because there's no demand to go to the doctor? Or do you think they're not going to the doctor because there's not enough cash in the United States economy? Let me assure you, it is because there is not enough money floating through the United States economy. Now, how do you know when there's too much money in the economy? Well, first of all, it's foolhardy to believe anybody can actually control the amount of money in the economy at any given time. It's foolhardy to believe that you can do that. That said, let's talk about what we can do. We can look at what we call sectoral balances. Okay? Sectoral balances are actually very simple. Okay? You have a bathtub. That bathtub is made up of our trade balance. In other words, are we a net importer or are we a net exporter? The next piece of that is private debt. Are we in massive private debt? Is everybody tapped to the point where there's no room for them to borrow anymore? Do they not have disposable income? And then the last one is the actual, you have public debt, you have private debt, and then you have rest of world, okay? So that's the three sectors that we're talking about. Taxes are a drain at the bottom that's another leakage. So when the tub starts shrinking down because we've taxed too much, or because we have a trade imbalance, or because we have too much private debt, the only way that we can really fill that bathtub up is for federal spending, because it's the currency issuer. So when you have that situation, the federal government must spend into it. So when people ask, are we against taxation? Absolutely not. We're 100% for taxation. We're at the right point of taxation, okay? So if you don't understand what we're saying, it naturally will sound like we're against taxes. We're just not. The issue is that we despise when people tell a lie that taxes are paying for things. We despise it in our core of our soul. It revolts us. It makes us nauseous when people say that. Because what it does is it sets up the other side to say, I don't really like what you want to do with that money. I don't really want to pay for your Obama phone. I don't want to pay for her abortion. I don't want to pay for that person's bad decisions. And the good news is, you're not. Federal taxes don't fund spending. It's our national resources, our national currency. And we as the American people need to understand our power and demand that they spend money on us too. Do you see what I'm saying? You've never heard them say we got to raise taxes to bomb someone, have you? You've never heard it. I promise you. You have absolutely never heard that they've got to have more taxes so they can bomb the shit out of somebody. It doesn't happen. Okay? And way back in the day when they sold war bonds. Do you know why they sold war bonds? Let me tell you why they sold war bonds. The United States was at full employment. We are nowhere near full employment today, folks. But they were at full employment back then. The economy was screaming. They had one way to go and one way only, and that was massive inflation. They were at a point right then where they were a net exporter. They were creating all kinds of stuff. They had everybody employed, and they were getting to a point where inflation was going to become a major problem. So what they did, to take money out of the economy, they went ahead and had people buy war bonds, which immediately parked money outside the system. See how easy this is? It wasn't to pay for the war. It was to take money out. Just like Social Security. Let's talk about the trickery there. Social Security is an interesting bird. We're all led to believe that this is something we pay into our whole life, and at the end of the day, we should get out of it, right? Well, the problem is that Social Security dollars are deleted. It's a tool to pull money out of the economy, okay? So what happens? When the government writes a friggin' Social Security check, it's once again keystroking new money into existence. There is no crisis for Social Security other than a man-made political one. A lie. Another ginormous lie. Do you see what I'm saying? And when people ask about a universal basic income and an offset to a job guarantee, I say, well, guys, that's great. We already have Social Security. We can expand Social Security. For those people that can't work, don't want to work, whatever, we can expand Social Security to accommodate their needs. And as far as a federal job guarantee, how dare those people that like the UBI deny anyone that would like to have a job? How dare you? How dare you? So the idea is to provide a federal job guarantee that allows local communities to decide what things they want to do in their local community that are maybe not profitable for the man, for the private sector to do. So they determine what they would like to do in their local community. And then they provide jobs to people to do those things. Amazing. Well, guess what? The states can't afford to do that because they would need to tax in order to get those jobs done. And that would push businesses out. They would do a lot of things, as you've seen Rust Belts, and you've seen Buffalo go bankrupt, and you've seen Texas cut the bottom out, the race to the bottom, okay? This idea is what causes the race to the bottom. So if we make the federal government spend on that, we don't have to worry about the tax side of this. Taxation does not need to be at sky-high levels. It just needs to be at a point that allows us to demand the currency back. That's what keeps its value. That's what keeps it going. Milton Friedman has been thoroughly debunked. His quantity theory of money, debunked. It's all a lie. All the Weimar Republic, all the friggin' Zimbabwe crap, debunked. It's all bullshit. It's all based on a lack of resources. Mugabe burned down all the farms, took them away from the white farmers that actually knew how to farm back then. And like it was one of those split personality moments. He was trying to assist the native population with farming, but yet they didn't know how to farm. So the farms went belly up. And they didn't have food, so there was too much money chasing too few goods, just like in Germany. The Germans, what did they do in Weimar Republic? You hear all the fruit nuts screaming about the friggin' Weimar Republic. Well, guess what that is? Weimar Republic was completely destitute because of foreign-denominated debt. Not state debt, like we have in the United States. Foreign-denominated debt. In other words, their debt was denoted in French francs because of the Treaty of Versailles. So their productive capacity was eradicated. So they had very small amount of goods with a lot of dollars chasing them. That is hyperinflation. That has nothing to do with printing money. For the people that say it, you have my permission to look them in the eye and say, do some homework. Okay, I'd like to say something different, but I'm trying to turn over a new leaf and say something sweet and kindful, like Elmo. Whatever. I just want to make sure people never, ever, ever, ever allow the people to talk about Zimbabwe or Weimar Republic ignorantly again, because it kills people. It literally kills people. Because how many people do you know of are afraid to spend money on Medicare for all, afraid to spend money on getting green energy, afraid to spend money on student debt relief because they're afraid of hyperinflation? How many buffoonicusses say that? Okay? So, tax dollars, what do? They don't pay for stuff, but they allow the government space to provision itself. They allow the government space to provision itself. They can be used for income inequality. However, let me state this for the record. The reason why we've seen such incredible wealth inequality in America, and this is for the knuckleheads who worthlessly said that MMT doesn't address income inequality or whatever, okay? For those people that have said that, and I know the names, I'll leave them in the dustbin because they don't deserve any credit. Okay, for those people that say this, here's the deal. Modern monetary theory pushes the federal job guarantee. What does the federal job guarantee do? I just talked about it a minute ago, but it sets the baseline. It sets the baseline for wages. It sets the baseline for benefits, and it produces something, so therefore it's not inflationary. Whereas just a UBI on its own produces nothing and is inflationary. You see what I mean? There's no productive output based on that. This is literally the definition of how that stuff happens. So when you see all the well-meaning people talk about the UBI, they don't know economics, they don't bother, they just say things, right? It feels good. God damn, it feels good to say, let's do a UBI. But it's economic foolhardy, ignorance, okay? And so you got to kindly and gently explain to people this, but unfortunately it's become a bit of a religion for the UBI crowd, so they stop listening and go, la la la, UBI, la 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 la. Calvinism, la 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 la, make work, la la la. But we've already described that the federal job guarantee is not make work, and it's wholly voluntary. So if you don't want to have a job in the job guarantee, involuntary unemployment is what the job guarantee provides for. It stops it. But if you want to not be employed, then there would be an option for something like expanded Social Security. Okay? The issue comes down to this. Taxes do not fund spending at the federal level. So why push for policies and programs and tie some bizarre thing to it saying that we got a tax to spend? Think about this for a minute. Why do you feel that we need to tax money to find a way to pay for things? If you don't understand this, you're not helping our cause. So it's time for you to learn this. Okay? If you think you've got an answer that's different than what I've said, it's probably not the right answer. This is not me coming up with this. I'm not the guru. I just happen to have done my homework, so I'm passing it along. The people that have done their homework can tell you this in a much more scientific way, in a way that maybe makes you feel better. But let me assure you, the doctors like Dr. Stephanie Kelton, Dr. L. Randall Wray, Dr. William Black, Dr. James Galbraith, Dr. Bill Mitchell, Dr. Stephen Hale, I could go on and on and on and on and on. They would tell you these things. Dr. Pavlina Cherneva, Dr. Fidel Kaboob, Dr. Matt Forstater. It's very, very important that you understand that I'm just a messenger. I'm John the Baptist, they're the Christ. I'm asking you all to unshackle your brains and learn how to produce a massive, massive tsunami of progressive reforms. By being stuck and not owning this, we have no power. We lose all our power. By understanding this, we can unleash the full power of the United States to help for once instead of destroy, to help the public purpose. This is why it's so important. Taxes are absolutely necessary. But in 1946, former New York Fed Chair Beardsley Rummel famously wrote that taxes for revenue are obsolete. We went off the gold standard in 1934. We went off the Bretton Woods Accord in 1971. We are on a free-floating, sovereign, non-convertible, meaning we can't convert it to gold, fiat currency that gives us incredible policy space that has nothing to do with the almighty petrodollar, that has nothing to do with the Jews or the Rothschilds, has nothing to do with Soros, has nothing to do with any of the other bullshit you hear from the pundits that don't do their homework, that say conspiracy things, that read Global Research CA and Zero Hedge and all the other nonsense from InfoWars or Peter Schiff or Ron Paul, you name it. I'm here to tell you the straight dope. If you want a progressive agenda, you must learn economics. I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives. I hope you learned something today. Have a great one, guys.